Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a creamy spinach potato soup, some almond scones with almond glaze. We're going to do some sandwiches, and then we're going to prep some bread for tomorrow. Okay, let's start by getting some bacon cooked up for our soup. So I'm going to turn my Dutch oven on, and then I'm going to pull out about, I don't know, like 3 to 4 slices of bacon here. It's nice. I've been using bacon all week and everything, and it's just delicious. But a whole pack can last you a while. So I'm going to use 4 slices of bacon, and we're going to cut it up into our Dutch oven here. So I'm just going to use my kitchen shears, and we're going to just cut strips of it. And this is going to give just a really rich flavor to the broth. And this is going to be kind of a savory, creamy broth with some Italian spices in it, which will pair well with the little potatoes and the spinach. There we go. Just cutting through. And then we'll add a little bit of olive oil and some onions. Just slicing these through. I would say if you don't have a good pair of kitchen shears, invest in them. I love them. They're great for just cutting up things. I guess a piece of bacon jumped out. I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Okay, so we've got our bacon in there. Let me get a spatula to give it a little stir. And then I'm going to put a little drizzle of olive oil in here. Helps if I open my olive oil. There we go. And let's chop up 1 yellow onion. And that way these can start caramelizing and cooking up while we make our scones. So I'm just going to cut off the ends. And then we're just going to remove this whole outer layer of onion. That way we have just a nice inside left. And then I'm going to just do a real simple dice on it. So I'm going to cut it off, and then I'm going to make about 4 slices across, and then we're going to square it off. There we go. And we'll do the same with the other one. And then we're going to caramelize these up with the bacon to really bring out their flavor, which will really enhance our broth. Okay. Perfect. Now let's add these in with our bacon. And then they can kind of cook up together. Okay, give them a nice stir. I want to make sure all of my onions get coated in the olive oil. I'm just going to pop them, break them apart. And then I'm going to turn mine down to about a 5, so a medium heat. And now we can work on our scones. Okay, we're going to make an almond scone with an almond glaze. So we're going to start out by doing our dry ingredients in here. So we're going to put in 2 cups of flour, of all-purpose flour. There we go. 1 and 2. And you want to use all-purpose because bread flour has too much gluten in it, and so it'll be a much denser scone. So you want just all-purpose flour. So we're going to use 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And then we're going to use 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Make sure you use baking powder, not baking soda. Let's get my right one. The green is my teaspoon. So we've got 1 and 2. And then we're going to use a 1/2 cup of sugar. There we go. I refilled all of my containers so they're up at the top. There we go. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. And so scones are not super sweet, but the glaze that we add on top will give it a nicer little sweetness to it. And now we're going to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to eyeball it. There we go. So we've got our dry ingredients right here. I'm going to give it a little swirl with my pastry cutter, and then we're going to cut in a half a cup of butter, which is 1 stick. There we go. So we've got these all mixed up nicely. I'm going to give my onions and bacon over here a little stir. There we go. So 1 stick, make sure your butter is cold because that's going to give you that nice flaky scone. So like similar to a biscuit. So I like to first kind of cut down, and then I'm going to go through again, and then we'll kind of cut it up into chunks. That just makes it a little bit easier for my pastry knife to go through it. Makes a little less work. Now you could always use a food processor to cut up your butter into your flour. But I find just a little elbow grease and it works just fine. There we go. Let's cut this guy off into here. And again, you want to use cold butter, and I'm using salted butter. I pretty much use salted butter in everything because I like salted butter. I feel like unsalted butter has no flavor. Okay, so I'm going to use my pastry cutter, which is like 5 blades, and we're just going to cut the butter into our flour mixture until we have no pieces bigger than a pea. And it takes only about a minute or so to get them all cut up. It doesn't take much. That's why I think it is easier to do this than to get a food processor out. There we go. And then kind of do when I'm doing it, I do like a kind of a twist in it. So I push down and twist to really cut through the butter. And then I'm going to just take my butter knife here. We're going to go through and just get any chunks that are stuck between my blades. And these blades are not like super sharp, so you don't have to worry about cutting yourself on them. There we go. Just cut and twist until it's all the way through. Again, this is not very hard. You know, it's a good little arm workout, but you can kind of cut through them pretty fast. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you could always do it with 2 knives where you're chopping it, but that does take a lot of time. If you're going to be making biscuits and scones a lot, invest in a pastry cutter. It makes the job so much easier. Okay, so now we have all of our butter cut into our flour mixture. And this is going to be making our delicious almond scones with a lovely glaze. I'm going to stir my onions over here, my bacon. We're caramelizing them up for our spinach and potato soup. There we go. I like to just cook them nice and low to really let that caramelization come out because it's going to bring a great flavor to our soup. Okay, let's start now with the wet ingredients. So we need a half a cup of discard. So you can use active or you can use one that hasn't been fed yet. Mine's active because I fed it this morning because in a little bit we're going to make some bread. But it doesn't matter because we're not using it for its rising process. We're just kind of using it to kind of get rid of it. So, and it adds a great flavor and moisture. So we want a half a cup of sourdough discard.
You have a question, what sourdough discard?
Sourdough discard is essentially what you take from your starter, which is fermented flour. So equal parts flour and water that have been fermenting on the countertop over a period of time. And that's what rises sourdough bread. So there is no yeast in sourdough bread, or like you don't add it. There's naturally occurring yeast, which is through the fermentation process. Okay, we've got our half a cup in there. Now we're going to add in 1 egg. And I'm going to kind of mix this in here. And then we're going to add in some almond extract and a little bit of cream. And then we're going to add the wet mixture to the dry mixture. And then we'll make our little scone pucks. There we go. Perfect. I'm going to give my onions. I just like to stir them every so often so none of them stick to the bottom of my Dutch oven. There we go. Okay, now we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, or not vanilla extract, almond extract. So we're going to add in 2 teaspoons. So 1 and 2. I'm going to give this a nice little stir, and then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of cream. I've got my cream over here because we're going to be using some in our soup. I think I'm going to need, I have like a teeny bit left in this. So we need 2 tablespoons of cream. So let's see, I've got 1 and, ooh, I almost, okay, just shy. We'll just put a little bit extra in there. Okay, let's put our cream in for our, there we go, just a splash more since I was a little short on that last tablespoon. We're going to give this a good stir up, and this is our wet mixture. And then we're going to add this into our dry mixture. But we want to be careful not to over mix it because we're going to be doing some presses and folds on the counter.
You have a question? What if you don't have any sourdough discard?
If you don't have any sourdough discard, then you could substitute that for a little bit of sour cream and flour. But the sourdough discard really gives it that really nice texture. So it would probably be like a 1/2 cup or a 1/4 of a cup sour cream and a 1/4 of a cup flour, mix it together. And you could use that in place of it. Because really sourdough discard is just a way to get rid of your discard from your starter. So you can just substitute it out with that, a mixture like that, just to replace that in your thing. But I really like, I will say it's really hard to replicate the deliciousness of a sour because it's different. It's a fermented flour. It has a kind of tartness, tanginess to it, and it really keeps things nice and moist. Okay, so I'm using a fork to mix my wet ingredients in, and we're going to have a really nice and kind of dry, shaggy mixture, which is what we want. We don't want it to be too wet because now what we're going to do is let me stir this real quick. I'm going to turn it down to about a 2 now since we're getting caramelization on it because now my hands are going to be dirty for a hot minute. We're going to flip this out and we're going to make our 2 pucks, kind of using the scone that we will then cut into 8ths because this will make 16 small scones. I like to do smaller scones, and I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. So it looks shaggy here. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be doing some presses, and then you're just going to fold everything up. And in once we've done a couple presses and folds, we're going to have a nice kind of dough that sticks together. You want to do the presses and folds because this is going to give you the nice flaky layers for our scone. You don't want to knead your batter or your scone dough because then you're going to have like rocks. So you want to just press and fold because every fold into it creates a new flaky layer. So these are pretty much kind of almost together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this dough in half. And now I'm just going to try to press and fold all of this to make a nice kind of puck. So it's going to be a nice round, about 1 inch thick. That's why I call it a puck. So just like that. So we've got this nice round little mound. And then we're just going to kind of press and fold this one. You don't want to knead it. Again, you just want to be pressing everything together. And we want to make them about the same height so that they cook up as evenly as possible. Perfect. So we've got our 2 kind of pucks here. And then what I'm going to use is I'm just going to take this is a pastry cutter and I'm just going to scoop it underneath and we're going to transfer it right onto our parchment paper. because I'm going to bake it on the parchment paper in the oven. Let's get this guy. And then we're going to divide each one into eighths. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it in half with my pastry kind of knife here. And then we're going to cut it again. And now we are going to make our little wedges. And I'm just going to pull each one out just a little bit like this. That way it will bake up evenly on the sides, but it gives you that really pretty kind of triangle look that is indicative of scones. Beautiful. And we're going to do the same over here. Now you can make 8 really big scones, but I find that the little ones just cook up so nice, and they are going to puff up quite a bit. So they're going to be bigger than this when we're done baking them. And they're just the perfect size. There we go. So I have my scones right here. Beautiful. And then we're going to pop these in the oven to bake. Now, if I was going to do, if we weren't going to do a glaze on them, I would brush them with cream and sugar. But because we're going to do a glaze, I'm just going to leave them plain. So we're going to go put these in our oven at 400 degrees. So you also want to make sure your oven has been preheated for a while, not that it just pinged at 400, because you want a nice, hot, evenly heated oven. We're going to put them in there, top rack, and then I'm going to set my timer for 18 minutes. Perfect. I'm going to give my hands a quick rinse, and then we're going to work on our soup. There we go. Okay, well, let's get our soup going here. So we have our bacon and our onions in a lovely caramelization here. They have got a rich golden color. This is going to bring out the most flavor. So now I'm going to add in my little baby potatoes. These are called like niblets potatoes. They cook up really fast. They're like a gold potato on the inside. And I'm just having them that way they soak up the lovely flavors of the broth. Because the flavors don't get quite through the skin. So you always want to have them. And we're just going to throw them in here. We're going to give them a quick saute. And then we're going to add our spices in and then our broth. And then we're going to let it simmer for a while. And then we'll add in some spinach. And at the very end, a little bit of cream. But we are going to add the spinach in at the very end, because if you add it in too soon, it will completely wilt away to like nothing in your soup. So that's one of my I add that at the end. Same with my fresh herbs. So we're going to get these potatoes cut up and just tossing them in, and we're going to let them kind of saute a little bit in that onion and bacon grease to give them just a little bit more flavor. Yeah. There we go. And these potatoes are really tender, so they're pretty easy to cut through. They're also great. Like I use them in soups a lot, but also like if you boil them and then just saute them up with some butter and garlic salt, they're also delicious. There we go. Just a few more left.
You have a question. Have you started your dough yet for your next loaf?
No, we'll be doing that in a few minutes. So I fed my starter this morning, so it's nice and active, and I've got the stuff out. We're gonna make another just traditional loaf, and then we're gonna make an everything bagel loaf. So kind of 2 savory loaves today.
You have a question. What type of potatoes are those?
These are called niblets or nibblers, I think. They're just little tiny yellow potatoes or gold potatoes. So they're really great for stews because they're a bit more waxy than a russet potato. I'm just going to toss them in here real quick. And now we're going to put in our seasonings to let our spices really come out. We're going to put in some garlic. About a teaspoon of garlic, which is about 2 to 3 cloves if you're going to mince it up yourself. And then about half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of paprika Let me shake it in and I'll let you know how much I will say a half a teaspoon of paprika. Then I'm going to take 2 bay leaves and I'm going to crush these up so that they can let their flavor out a little bit faster. And when you crush them up really small, you don't notice them at all in your soup. So we're going to give them a real nice crush here into nice little flakes. So they'll be just like all of your other kind of seasonings in here. But they're going to let out their flavor, which is great for stews and soups that you're doing quickly. We're going to add in about a teaspoon of dried parsley. About a teaspoon of basil. And a teaspoon of oregano. And a half a teaspoon of ground black pepper. And then a couple shakes of garlic salt. We're going to get most of our saltiness from the chicken bouillon that we're going to add, but I like to have it just a little bit. And we're going to mix this around in that kind of that mixture of bacon grease and oil with our vegetables. And this is going to really help bring out the natural flavors of these herbs. Oil really helps that bring out with the heat.
You have a question? Someone wants to know how they can get the recipe for the scones and the soup and everything.
Yes, so we will post these videos on the link on our page, typically within a couple hours after doing that, so you can always reference it back. And then we do post recipe cards, but that takes me a bit longer to get through. But I am planning to make the almond scone recipe card for this one. That's like my next recipe card I'm making. But the best way to get to it, the quickest way, is just rewatching the video after we post it. That way you're not waiting on me to make the card. Okay, we've got these all in here, letting them heat up. And now we are going to add, we're going to let them saute for a minute. Let's see. And then we're going to add about 4 cups of water and a big scoop of chicken bouillon. So let me grab a measuring cup over here. This is a 4-cupper. I like to use this over chicken broth because it has more flavor. I feel like chicken broth can be really like bland. Let's get this up. Okay, so 4 cups of water. Beautiful. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my spatula here and to make sure I scrape off all of those delicious seasonings on the bottom because I really want them to incorporate into our broth. And now I'm going to put in a nice big heaping spoonful of chicken bouillon. And you can use chicken broth, but if you do use chicken broth, you'll probably want to add a bit more salt. So I just had we used up the rest of our chicken bouillon yesterday, so I've got to open this guy up. They always put these little stickers on here that you cannot twist it open unless you peel them off. There we go. And then we're going to just take a nice big scoop of chicken bouillon. And this is going to give you a nice chicken flavor to your broth as well as add the saltiness to your soup. We're going to stir that in, and then we're going to let this come to a nice simmer. And then I can start cooking the potatoes. And while we're doing that, we're going to make our bread, and then we're going to start on our sandwiches. Okay, I'm going to turn my heat up to about a 6 until we have a good consistent boil. Okay, let's start on our bread. Let me kind of clean up a little bit of this area over here so we're not getting breadcrumbs. And here, I can use my pastry scraper to just scrape my counter clean, which is kind of nice. Just some of these excess stuff that we won't be needing. And we're going to make our sourdough bread. So we're going to be using our starter. We don't need this flour.
Yeah, question. The liquid in the soup, was that just water flavored with bouillon?
Yes. So you could use chicken broth if you want, but it was chicken bouillon that I used. You could use vegetable as well, but I feel like chicken's a little bit nicer. Okay, let's make our sourdough. So for sourdough making, you definitely need a scale. It's just comes out way better with it than if you were using like the US customary. The grams just work a lot better. And I got my bread flour right here. And this is warm water. I always use warm water because it helps the flour hydrate faster. So for our breads, we're going to use our basic recipe. I'm going to add 100 grams of active sourdough starter to each bowl. So you can tell your starter is active when it has nice bubbles in it. I'd already stirred it off of it, but these have just great bubbles. It's nice and fed. You always need to feed it about, I want to say 4 to 8 hours before you make a loaf of bread so that it is ready to start that like rising process. Okay, so we've got 100 grams there. And then we're going to do 100 grams in here. Perfect. Let's see. And that's why I say it's just easier to do things with a scale than it is with measurements, because a cup can vary so much of how much is like a flour is packed down in it. Okay, and now we're going to add 375 grams of warm water. You got to use warm water. It will help the flour really hydrate faster. Makes it a little bit easier to work with. And sourdough dough is a stickier dough.
Do you have a question for the scale? You have to minus the bowl?
Yes. So on here, if I just turn it off and on, it will take the bowl out. So yeah, it's called, like, I guess, is it tearing or tarring, or that's essentially taking away. So I'll put it on here and I'm going to turn my scale off and on, and then we'll do that again. That way it's harder if you can technically keep it on and then add everything, but they always say just take it between every new ingredient, just bring it back to 0 so you're not having to do the math in your head. Okay, so we want 375. Perfect. And it's okay. Like, people are like, oh, but what if you're going over? Sourdough is pretty forgiving. You can go over and it's not a big deal. Like, you can go over 5-10 grams of water or flour or starter and everything turns out fairly well because that's a minuscule amount. I'm using my dough whisk right now to just kind of make sure my starter gets diluted into the water. That way it will mix into the flour easy. And that's why you want to do these two together versus like water, flour, and then the starter, because you want it to all mix in very easily. Now we are going to add in some salt. You want about 2 teaspoons of salt. So I'm just going to eyeball my 2 teaspoons, which is, if you're doing it with a scale, it's about 8 to 10 grams of salt. But I find that I just eyeball it now, and it's around 2 teaspoons. We're going to give this a nice little stir, and then we're going to we'll add 500 grams to our basic one, and I'm going to add a little bit of seasonings. Where are you? There we go. We're going to add some everything bagel seasoning and some onion powder to my specialty loaf. So we're going to do that real quick, and then we'll do the flours. So for my everything bagel, we're going to be adding this at 2 different points. So we're going to add it now to be mixed throughout the bread. And then we're going to add the very end, when we're shaping it, we are going to then put it in to, like, we're going to put the whole outside of the bread in it. So I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons right now. So that's 1 and 2 of the everything bagel to it. And then we're going to add about a tablespoon of onion powder, which is going to give you a really nice flavor. So crush it in there. Perfect. And this is just going to give you kind of that onion bread taste, which goes really well with the everything bagel. So let me give this a nice stir. And then we're going to add 500 grams of bread flour to each one. And you want to make sure you're using unbleached flour. So I'm just going to use my bowl here. And then we're going to just put 500 grams, which is about 3 cups, give and take. So we've got, it's a 86 and about 450. So just a little bit more. Okay. And we're just going to just dump it right in there. And we're going to bring it back to 0. And then we're going to add in 500 for our next one. And these make 2 pretty good sized loaves, which we love. We'll eat them with dinner, and then we like to make grilled cheeses or melts with the rest of them. Perfect. Okay. Put this guy over here. And then we're going to add our bread flour in here. We're done with our scale. I'd say it's not a difficult process. And we're going to use our bread whisk now, and we're going to just mix it up. And this is a bread whisk, if you're not, it's like a spoon or a whisk that has these things. It's really easy to mix up our dough with it. It also goes by the name of a Danish whisk. And it is like, if you're going to go on the sourdough journey, it's a necessity. It works so much better than a spoon to mix and incorporate your dough together. Okay, so we've got this nice and mixed up. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to let it hydrate for about 15 minutes. And then we're going to do our first stretch and pulls. So let's get that one. We're going to mix this one up. And then we're going to work on our soup and our sandwich. And we're going to make our glaze for our scones. Okay. Beautiful. Just mix it up. Perfect. And the reason it mixes so nice is, again, it's using that warm water that really helps it come together. Okay, so now you just let it sit and do its magic. Perfect. Put these. I'm going to give my hands a quick wash. Okay. Let's check on our soup. Give it a stir. I think the potatoes are still simmering. So we're going to, the very end, we'll add some stuff in, but I think we're going to make our sandwiches right now, and then we're going to make our glaze for our scones because those should be coming out any minute. Okay. Today, so last night, we made focaccia using sourdough discard, and we have a couple good chunks left, and they are going to be perfect for just a nice cold sandwich. Okay, so here is our beautiful focaccia. So we made it last night with our sourdough discard. Beautiful. And I figured we can just cut it right through and we can make some nice sandwiches with it since it's such a lovely bread. I'm going to turn my stew down to about a 3, let it simmer. And let's get a plate out for our sandwiches. Okay. So we're going to start. I'm just going to cut there, and then we're just going to try to cut it through nice and even in half, so you have like kind of 2 slices of bread. Perfect. And you can see how just like beautiful moist. This was a quick focaccia where we used a cup of sourdough discard as well as yeast. So we've got one for our first one. And here we go. We're just going to cut the edge off of that. And then we're going to just cut it right down. And that way you'll have just 2 nice slices of bread. Perfect. And we have lots of focaccia left over. Okay, we're going to make a quick pesto aioli, just using some pesto and mayo to spread on it for the bread. Give me a little spoon. And what we're just going to do is about just maybe a tablespoon of mayo. You don't need much, but this is going to give a nice herby flavor that will go great with the our sandwiches. And then I'm going to put a little bit of pesto in here, about a teaspoon, because pesto's got a pretty strong flavor, so you don't need too much of it. And we're going to mix it together. Beautiful. And then we're going to spread it on. But guess what? Our scones are ready to come out of the oven. Let me grab a trivet so I can put these on over there. Beautiful. Oh, you can smell the lovely almond flavor that comes with these scones. They just smell so wonderful popping out. Okay, and you can see with the press and folds where we have these just beautiful flaky layers. Perfect. And let those sit there. We are going to dress them with a glaze in just a second. But let's finish up our sandwiches. We're going to take our herby mayo and we're just going to spread a little bit on each kind of slice of bread. You don't need much, but it will add a nice kind of herby, simple flavor to it. It's nice, kind of like how garlic aiolis work. Beautiful. Okay. And now let's start to assemble. We're going to use some havarti cheese and some cheddar cheese. Of course, it doesn't want to open. There we go. I love a good havarti. Havarti is a nice kind of creamy cheese. It's very, very smooth. So we're going to put these on our sandwiches. I think perfect. I think one slice on the bottom. There we go. And then we're going to do some ham, some roast beef, and a little bit of pepperoni. So it's kind of like, a take on a club sandwich. It's a nice thing we want to get rid of. I'm trying to clear out my, my sandwich stuff drawer, where you keep all the cheese and the meats. I was like, oh, I got to clear it out so I can do a refresh. And this is where you make one of those everything sandwiches. And we're going to put some roast beef on here. Perfect. And then a few pepperonis to give it a little bit of a kick, a nice little spice in it. It's kind of like when you go to Subway or whatnot, they have this thing called an Italian BMT, and it has your pepperonis on it and salami and whatnot. And I always find that I'm not a huge pepperoni fan, but I do like the nice little sharpness of the spice that it gives to it. Perfect. Let's give our soup a little stir here because we are almost done with everything. Okay, let's put on, let's get a couple things of romaine. Beautiful. We have got our tomato. Let me grab a knife to slice this guy up because you've got to have tomatoes on a sandwich. Take those guys off. Perfect. In the summer, it's so nice when you have your homegrown tomatoes and they're just bursting with fresh flavor. Beautiful. And let's not forget a few red onions. So we're just going to pull off this last one and then I can just pop it out here. I'm just going to turn this lettuce leaf upside down so it will hold in there better. Get some nice crunch from our red onions. Yeah, you don't want to sit still on there, do you? Okay, and then we're going to put our top layer is just another slice of, we're going to do some cheddar cheese on the top. And then our sandwiches are made. We're going to throw in our last ingredients for our soup and we'll make our glaze real quick. Beautiful. So we've got our kind of, bougie club sandwiches today using the rest of our focaccia that we made last night. Now, do these not just look absolutely delicious and fresh and kind of perfect for the weather? It's nice. It's getting up to 81 degrees here today. Okay, we've got our stew here. Our potatoes should be nice and tender now. So I'm going to turn up my heat. And now we've got some fresh spinach, and we're going to add in a couple handfuls of fresh spinach and let them cook in down. Spinach, I will say it looks big right now, but it does like wilt away to nothing. So let's give this a quick stir. I'm going to try to pop all of that spinach underneath. And in about a minute or two, that will be nice and wilted. But while that wilts, let's get our glaze going for our delicious almond scones. We're going to start with 1 cup of powdered sugar. And then we're going to be using some almond extract and cream. Let's grab a spoon, get my almond extract and my cream. And glazes are super simple, but they're just a really great way to like elevate your scones, give them a little bit more sweetness because they're naturally not sweet. We're going to put a teaspoon of almond extract in. And then we're going to start with about, wrong cap, 2 to 3 tablespoons of cream. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to give this a nice mix with my spoon. And we want our glaze to have a kind of a runny enough texture that we can drizzle over our scones. So if I have to add a teensy bit more cream in, I will, because you want it to drizzle. There we go. So I'm just going to add maybe a splash more because I don't quite, it's thicker. I want it to be a little bit more runny. So probably another tablespoon. Now, if you don't have cream, you could use half and half, and you can always use milk as well, but you would need less of it because milk is a bit more, it's more viscous than cream is. Okay, so here is the consistent we want. Kind of almost looks like glue or paste. That's the perfect consistency for our scones. Okay, let me stir this and let me grab my almonds. There they are. Okay, let's drizzle up our scones. I'm going to bring them a little bit closer here. Okay, so I'm going to take it. We're going to drizzle this over. So this is my almond glaze that we're going to drizzle over our almond scones that we used our sourdough discard with. And then I'm going to sprinkle them with a little bit of kind of shaved almonds. Gives you that nice little bakery look and a little crunch on the top. And these are just absolutely delicious. The press and fold we did in the process gives us that nice flaky layers in it that like you see when you have a biscuit. And you want to glaze them when they're still warm. You don't want to wait until they're cold to glaze them because you want it to kind of run off. There we go. Beautiful. And now I'm just going to take my little sliced almonds here. And then we're just going to flake a couple on each one. It gives you that nice kind of bougie bakery look. But they add a nice little crunch too. There we go. And these are our delicious sourdough scones, our almond sourdough scones with our delicious almond glaze. And we finish them off with a little bit of sliced almonds for just this over-the-top almond scone deliciousness. But they are gorgeous. Okay. We are going to finish up our soup now, and then we are going to be ready for lunch. So we've got our potatoes, we've got our spinach in here. You can see that the spinach is already wilted down. We're going to finish it off with a little bit of green onions to add a nice kind of fresh burst of onions, and then a splash of cream to just give you a really nice, rich, creamy broth for this spinach and potato soup. There we go. And then I'm just going to leave out the very tips because those get a little bit dehydrated after they've been picked. Okay, I'll stir these guys in. And then we're going to add about a 1/3 cup of cream to just give you that really luscious broth. Here we go. It's about all we need. And then let me give it a quick taste to make sure it has all the flavors in it that I want. Perfect. Okay, let's serve up our lunch. Get my little cauldron out and a ladle here. Okay, so we have our delicious creamy potato and spinach soup that we use some bacon in and some lovely Italian spices. And we made kind of club sandwiches with our leftover focaccia that we made with sourdough discard last night. And of course, we have our almond scone for dessert. So this is our delicious lunch today. We have our soup and our sandwich and a scone. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're cooking for our family, what we're having for lunch and dinner. Feel free to comment or message us with any cooking questions or recipes you'd like to see us try. Thanks again for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.